He was a permanent secretary in the Ministry of Works in the 1970s after discovering overspending and mass corruption in the issuing of government contracts on the McGregor Gully project. He launched an investigation to expose and stop the culprits. For his honest and brave decision to expose corruption, he was cut down in broad daylight in front of his house. I speak of Edward Ogilvie. In this video, I look back on his life, death, and the arrest and court trial that followed. I am Nigel D. Summer. Welcome to Jamaican Chapter. Edward Antonio de Liza Ogilvie was born on Friday, August 1, 1930 at 11 Blake Road, Kingston. His mother was Elma Meir, a clerk, and his father was Edward Alexander Ogilvie, a wharf finger. After going through his early years of schooling, Edward Ogilvie attended Cornwall College in Montego Bay, where he was sports and junior science master. In 1952, he was awarded a Colonial Development and Welfare Scholarship for electrical engineering. Acting on the scholarship, he left Jamaica to study at Faraday House Electrical Engineering College in London, England. Aged 22 at the time of leaving, he spent 4 years at the college where he earned an engineer's degree. Edward Ogilvie returned to Jamaica by ship in 1956, reaching the island on June 5 of that year. At age 26 in 1956, he joined the government service as an engineer with the Public Works Department. In his personal life, Mr. Ogilvie fell in love and married a woman called Barbara, and the couple had 4 children, settling as a loving family at 18 Lydia Drive, Heavendale, St. Andrew. Educated, hardworking, and ambitious, Mr. Ogilvie earned respect and reaped successes in his endeavors. He was an engineer. He was a founding member and past president of the Institute of Engineers in the 1960s. He was a member of the Standard Council of the Jamaica Bureau of Standards, and showing the competence and required qualifications, he was appointed permanent secretary in the Ministry of Works. In the year 1968, Mr. Ogilvie lost both his parents. His father was diagnosed with stomach cancer and died on March 6 at age 77 in Falmouth Public Hospital. 3 months later, his mother, Elma Ogilvie, who had hypertension, died on June 30 in Nuttall Memorial Hospital after suffering a ruptured artery and a condition called cardiac tamponade. Both of his parents were buried in Falmouth Public Cemetery. Mr. Ogilvie was known as a hard-working, professional, and strict official in the Ministry of Works. Above these qualities, he was honest. He was known to be a very honest man. In mid-October of 1973, a tropical storm called Gilda hit the Caribbean. Gilda first affected Jamaica, bringing heavy rainfall and wind over the island for 3 days. This triggered many landslides in eastern parishes. Elsewhere on the island, the mudslides caused further property damage and left some roads unpassable. Hundreds of families were left homeless, and according to one source, 6 Jamaicans lost their lives. Tropical Storm Gilda moved on and affected Cuba, Bahamas, east coast of the United States, and eastern Canada. Following the passing of Tropical Storm Gilda, the Michael Manley-led government appointed the Public Works Department of the Ministry of Works to manage few floodwater control schemes in the Kingston and St. Andrew parishes in accordance with the Floodwater Control Act. These floodwater control schemes were, in simple terms, construction projects for the control of floodwater. That's what they were. Repair and construction of water channels or gullies for the proper control of floodwater. One of such construction projects was the McGregor Gully project. This project was designed to repair and construct a significantly long area for floodwater control. The McGregor Gully project was a 3-year project with a budget of 2 million Jamaican dollars. 2 million Jamaican dollars was originally budgeted for this project. The project kicked off with bright expectation. A man called Weston Dyer was employed in the Ministry of Works as an assistant superintendent of special works. For the McGregor Gully project, he was responsible for giving out work, supervising and certifying that the work was properly carried out and that money spent was within the authorized limit. But not long after the project began, Weston Dyer started making bad decisions, possibly out of fear and greed. The McGregor Gully project was in a deprived East Kingston area, and the so-called bad men and desperate youths targeted the project for jobs and money. A man called Winston Reed of an East Kingston address approached Weston Dyer one day on the project site and told him that he knew the runnings of the area and that he, Winston Reed, could control the youth them. No doubt, Weston Dyer wanted someone who could control the men in the area. Control them in the sense that they won't pest the project site. So he gave in to Winston Reed's arrangement and began paying him up to $13,000 a week, which was a protection money. Weston Dyer supervisor of the McGregor Gully project, got associated with the dodgy Winston Reed, which had a negative effect on the operation of the project. Winston Reed began seeing himself as the right-hand man of Weston Dyer and even called himself Weston Dyer's financial minister. Finance minister because Weston Dyer let him, Winston Reed, cash forged checks, and then both men shared in some of the proceeds. Weston Dyer issued checks to unemployed youths that he, Winston Reed, suggested. And Weston Dyer was paying him, Winston Reed, $13,000 per week protection money. Weston Dyer also increased his pocket illegally from the project and issued contracts only to activists for the People's National Party, PNP, or to persons recommended by PNP members of parliament and councillors. Mr. Ogilvie, Chief Technical Director of all the floodwater control schemes in Kingston and St. Andrew, grew suspicious that there were overspending and corruption in the McGregor Gully project. He, Mr. Ogilvie, felt that money paid out on the project cannot be justified by work done. And the big question was, who exactly were the contractors? Mr. Ogilvie began auditing the McGregor Gully floodwater control project. In June of 1976, he summoned Weston Dyer to his office at the Ministry of Works and asked him to bring a list of all contractors. Mr. Ogilvie grew even more suspicious after this meeting as evidence of disparity and irregularity was coming to light. In December 1976, Mr. Ogilvie stopped all payments on contracts pending the outcome of investigation. But this decision by Mr. Ogilvie to stop payments on all contracts and start an investigation was to prove fatal for him. You see, the overspending on the McGregor Gully project was benefiting criminals, gang members, as well as non-gang members who wanted some of the money we are run. So when Mr. Ogilvie put a stop on payment during the investigation, he unknowingly presented himself as a problem that the criminals soon wanted to eliminate. And it was not long before a conspiracy to murder the permanent secretary developed. The conspirators carefully studied Mr. Ogilvie's movement. They wanted to go at him at one of his most vulnerable moments, and that moment they chose was when he went home from work at midday to have lunch. This routine by Mr. Ogilvie was widely known. Every working day, or almost every working day, he went home around 12 noon, had lunch, then went back to work after 1 p.m. Thursday, June 16, 1977 was just another day for Mr. Ogilvie. As usual, he drove from his work at the Ministry of Works, 140 Maxfield Avenue, to his home at 18 Lydia Drive, Heavendale, St. Andrew. The permanent secretary that day ate his home-cooked meal, looked over some paperwork, and sometime after 1 p.m., he exited the house. He walked towards his car, a 120 wide Datsun motor car. He reached out his hand to pull the driver's door open. At this time, a green Honda 354 motorbike with two men on it was parked near the gate to Mr. Ogilvie's house. Mr. Ogilvie must have noticed the two men, but made nothing of it. About 30 seconds before, 17-year-old school student Cable Tinger had walked past the two suspicious men on the motorbike. Cable Tinger was heading for school. He never knew it at the time, but he was to be caught up in a murder case as a prosecution witness. The 17-year-old heard gunshots. He turned and saw the two men escaping on the motorbike. The frightened but curious 17-year-old school student walked back to 18 Lydia Drive, where he saw two bullet holes in the front windscreen of the 120 wide Datsun motor car, and saw Mr. Ogilvie slumped over the steering wheel with two bullet wounds to the head. The shots had rendered Mr. Ogilvie unconscious, but not dead. He was first rushed to Medical Associates Hospital. Soon after, he was transferred to the University Hospital of the West Indies. His situation was very critical. The brain of the permanent secretary was irreversibly damaged by the two bullets, and he had lost a significant amount of blood. Just 6 hours after he was shot, the 46-year-old Edward Antonio Ogilvie succumbed to his injuries. The murder of Mr. Ogilvie was met with shock and disbelief. The attack was strongly condemned by various dignitaries and other voices of influence. Prime Minister Michael Manley joined in on the condemnation. In a statement after his return to the island on June 19, 3 days after the attack, he gave a clear warning to any group of people who believe that they can influence the distribution of work in government contracts by this sort of outrageous and anarchist behavior. Both the Jamaica Labour Party JLP and the People's National Party PNP claimed that the killing of Mr. Ogilvie was due to his work in connection with government contracts. Police investigation began. Because Mr. Ogilvie was no ordinary man, police investigators carried on the investigation with every resource they had. By September of 1977, arrest warrants were issued for 4 men suspected of involvement in the crime. Those 4 men were Philip Burrell, who lived in the corporate area. After his arrest, he faced a preliminary inquiry in the gun court. At the end of the preliminary hearing, he was committed to stand trial for the murder of Mr. Ogilvie. But Philip Burrell never went through a trial. This is because the prosecution told the court that there was not sufficient evidence to substantiate the charge against him. The judge then set Philip Burrell free in December of 1978. The next man charged was Weston Dyer, former superintendent of works in the Ministry of Works. Weston Dyer lived in Independence City, St. Catherine. He was arrested and charged with conspiracy to murder and incitement to murder Mr. Edward Ogilvie. These charges came as a result of an interrogation police officers had with Winston Reed, the very same man that Weston Dyer was paying the $13,000 per week protection money to. You see, Winston Reed was detained by the police on suspicion of being involved in the killing of Mr. Ogilvie. During the interrogation, he told police officers that it was Weston Dyer who sent the 2 men on the motorbike to carry out the killing. He told the police that he learned about the plan to kill Mr. Ogilvie when he overheard the conversation Weston Dyer was part of. After the police decided to release Winston Reed without charge, Winston Reed later became the main prosecution witness who delivered a damaging blow to Weston Dyer's defense in court. Weston Dyer first faced preliminary inquiry on November 27, 1979. At the end of the preliminary inquiry, he was committed to stand trial for the murder. On June 4 of 1980, Weston Dyer was found guilty by a jury of 12 on both charges: the conspiracy to murder and incitement to murder. For the conspiracy to murder charge, he was sentenced by the judge to 10 years imprisonment at hard labor. On the incitement to murder charge, he was sentenced to 6 years imprisonment. The sentences were to run concurrently. Weston Dyer, through his lawyers, filed application to the Court of Appeal against the sentences. The Court of Appeal accepted his application and in July of 1981 overturned the sentences and ordered a new trial. The Court of Appeal made these decisions after concluding that the trial was a miscarriage of justice because the trial judge failed to inform the jury that there was no corroboration in the case and that this failure by the judge might very well have led the jury to regard as corroboration evidence which did not amount to such. But by this time, the early 1980s, Weston Dyer was getting very ill from diabetes. When he was granted bail for his new trial, the bail application was made on the grounds that he was seriously ill and the medication he required was not available in prison. So ill was Weston Dyer that he could not even go twice per week to the Caymanas police station as a condition of his bail. He never went through a new trial. He lost both of his legs to diabetes. On December 24 of 1983, Weston Dyer died in the Kingston Public Hospital at age 55 from cardiac arrest and diabetic gangrene. The third suspect in the death of Mr. Ogilvie was George Flash. When George Flash found out that the police wanted to arrest and charge him for the murder of Mr. Ogilvie, he went into hiding and later fled to the island of Cuba in 1980. In the same year, 1980, he made it to Jamaica's most wanted list for the murder with a $5,000 reward to anyone who could provide information leading to his capture. George Flash was considered to have been one of the two men on the motorbike who pulled the trigger on Mr. Ogilvie. George Flash was no stranger to the police by the time of Mr. Ogilvie's death. He had been implicated in crimes including bank robbery. His decision to flee to Cuba eventually worked in his favor. He spent over a decade in Cuba. On his full return to Jamaica in the 1990s, he turned himself in at the CIBC headquarters in downtown Kingston on Wednesday, March 3, 1999, accompanied by People's National Party Region 3 Chairman Paul Burke. George Flash was charged for the murder of Mr. Ogilvie. But the passing of time since the murder did some damage. Witnesses could not be located, and the police could not locate the case file. Because of these problems for the prosecution, George Flash was acquitted of the murder charge. The fourth and last suspect wanted by the police for the death of Mr. Ogilvie was Anthony Brown. Anthony Brown, aka Tony Brown, had met George Flash in prison and both had become friends. Both had become friends in prison. Tony Brown was considered to be the other man on the motorbike when Mr. Ogilvie was shot. He fled to Cuba with George Flash and later he went to England. Tony Brown returned to Jamaica in the early 1990s. In April of 1993, he turned himself in to the Jamaican police and was formally charged for the murder of Mr. Ogilvie. But due to lack of evidence, he was acquitted. By the end of the year 1999, it was clear to all that no one was really punished for the shooting of the permanent secretary in the Ministry of Works. On Monday, October 17, 1977, 6-year-old Andrew Ogilvie accepted the Order of Distinction on behalf of his late father, Mr. Edward Ogilvie. The Order of Distinction was presented by Governor General Sir Florizel Glaspole for Mr. Ogilvie's outstanding public service. The official funeral for the 46-year-old Edward Ogilvie was held on Friday, June 24, 1977 at the Church of St. Peter and Paul, Old Hope Road, Kingston. Many were in attendance, including the Governor General Sir Florizel Glaspole and Minister of Works Ernest Peart. The casket bearing the body of Mr. Ogilvie was draped in the flag of Cornwall College, an institution he once attended. After the funeral, the body of Mr. Ogilvie was buried in the Falmouth Public Cemetery in the parish of Trelawney.